Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform, and this is going to be a fascinating one. I have Chip Conley, founder and CEO of MEA, which stands for Modern Elder Academy. He's had a fascinating career. I saw him present at South by Southwest last month in Austin on basically his book called Learning to Learn to Love Midlife. What a great title. And he said, what's the associated word with midlife? It's crisis. That's the absolute wrong association we have. So he's going to talk about midlife and why it's the best years of our life. But we're also going to talk about bookended with the aging population, which is about to retire or has retired, and also the generation following, which is, maligned for not for being entitled and God knows what else. So this is going to be a demographic view of how the workforce is changing. Chip, I want you to introduce yourself. Talk about modern elder. I know it's got something to do with Airbnb and so on, but introduce yourself. First of all, thank you for joining me. But this is going to be fascinating.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Vinny. So quick background on me. I started a boutique hotel company at age 26 in San Francisco called Joie de Vivre. And over the course of the next 24 years, we created 52 boutique hotels around the state of California. We became the second largest boutique hotelier in the US. But in my late 40s, after I'd run the company for 20 years, I was struggling. I was having a midlife crisis. I now call it the midlife chrysalis because the halfway stage, the midlife stage between caterpillar and butterfly is the chrysalis. It's dark and gooey and solitary, but it's also where the transformation happens. And I found my transformation when I sold my company. I had an NDE. I died 9 times in 90 minutes due to an allergic reaction to an antibiotic. And it really woke me up to just saying, I really have to change everything. My life wasn't feeling good at that point. So at around age 50, I sold my company, my boutique hotel company at the bottom of the Great Recession. And I had a couple years of a midlife atrium, time and space to think about what was next. And at age 52, I got approached by the founders of Airbnb who wanted me to help their little tech startup. This was 11 and a half years ago. They were growing fast, but they didn't really understand the hospitality or travel business. They didn't have a leadership or entrepreneurial background either. So I spent the next 7.5 years, 4 years full-time, 3.5 years part-time, as the modern elder of Airbnb. They called me that because they said, Chip, you're as curious as you are wise. And I said, oh, if that's what a modern elder is, I will be your modern elder. And let's be honest, at 52, I was twice the age of the average employee there. After I finished my full-time work there and I went to part-time, I came here to Mexico, where I am right now, Baja California, an hour north of Cabo San Lucas. I was going to write a book, another one of my books. I like writing books. This book was going to be called and is called Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And while writing that book here in Baja, went for a run on the beach and I had a Baja aha. I had an epiphany. And the epiphany was, why do we not have midlife wisdom schools? Why don't we have a place where people can find their midlife chrysalis, find how to reimagine, repurpose themselves personally, professionally, spiritually? And that's really how MEA came about, the Modern Elder Academy. We have been around now for over 6 years. We've had 5,000 people from 48 countries come to our Baja campus to go through our week-long programs. And we now have a new campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So let's dive into the slides, Vinny, and we can talk a little bit more about learning to love midlife. Because I'm proud of this book. It came out in January. It hit #1 on Amazon for happiness and self-help books. So there's definitely a need for people to understand midlife a little bit better. And I've seen that at MEA, partly because the average age of the people who come to MEA is 54 years old. And interestingly, I'll just say, oh, here we go. Learning to love midlife, 12 reasons why life gets better with age. So we're going to go through this very quickly because I really want people to know is just a little taste test of it. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So that's the book. And as I said, it came out in January. I was lucky enough to be on the Today Show and Good Morning America the week it came out. Um, so let's go through these 12 reasons why life gets better with age, because we're very clear about what gets worse with age, but we're not very clear about what gets better. So this first slide says, I have more life left than I thought. And what does that mean? It means that we often have very poor longevity literacy. If you're a 63-year-old man like me, and you hear that the average man in the United States dies at age 74, you might think that me at 63, I have 11 years left. But the truth is that actually, if you've gotten to 63, you are, when they say the average age is 74, that includes everybody who might have died at age 10, 20, 30, 50. So if you've gotten to 63, number one, you're in good shape. You're going to live longer than 74 as a man. Number two is, if you're, depending upon your socioeconomic background, the more educated you are, the longer you're going to live. The more prosperous you are, the more longer you're going to live, the more healthy you are. So while at 63, I might think I only have 11 years left because the average man in the United States lives till 74 or 75. The truth is, my longevity, based upon all the tests that have been done, is probably more like 86. In fact, my parents are both 86. So the likelihood is maybe I'll live till 86 or 90. The average age of the person who comes to MEA is 54. The average age they think they're going to live till is 90. 54 is halfway between 18 and 90.
That's a
So
great perspective.
yeah, right. I mean, so at 54, you're like, oh, I'm halfway through my adult life. And if you're halfway through your adult life, the question you might ask yourself is 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't learn it or do it now? Let's go to the next slide. I'm relieved my body no longer defines me. Now, this is particularly true for women, but it can be true for men as well. Up until around midlife, and midlife I define as the life stage between early adulthood and later adulthood. It might last 35 to 75, maybe 40 years long. So you get into midlife, especially around age 50, and you realize your body is not what it used to be. Your looks are not what it used to be. And for some people, they do everything they can to try to, recover their age. They want to be youthful forever. The more
Or
important
they,
thing
or
is
they go buy Ferraris, right? To
they
make
buy Ferraris, they buy Botox, they do all kinds of things to make themselves look and feel better. But the reality is, it's not about being youthful forever. It's about being useful forever. And so one of the upsides, one of the reasons life gets better with age is it's around midlife that you start to realize that, you're not defined by your body. It's not just your physical body. It could be your heart, your mind, your soul, your relations. There's lots of different ways to look at your life. You don't have to look at your life exclusively based upon how does your body look. And so for a lot of people around midlife, they start to realize that. Next slide, please. I'm making friends with my emotions. Emotional intelligence grows with age. Now, IQ does not, but EQ does. Our emotional moderation, our ability to be less reactive, grows with age. So there's a whole collection of things around our emotional life that gets better. And we learn how to dance with our emotions. We learn how to make friends with our emotions. We learn that our emotions don't define us. And so that is something that gets better with age. Next slide, please.
And Chip, is that true even in the last, what we've been through with COVID and all the political polarization? Still,
Yeah. I mean, it's still true in the sense that as we get older, we're better able to moderate our emotions and we understand our emotions better. So yes, it's a tough time right now with COVID and with polarity in the society, a lot of uncertainty. But one of the things that does get better is, and this is particularly true in some recent research that has shown that the level of depression amongst people in their late teens and in their 20s is skyrocketing. And we're not seeing that similar skyrocketing for people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s.
that's good to know. There's hope, right?
There's hope. Yes. The fourth of the 12 reasons why life gets better with age is I invest in my social wellness. Harvard has been doing a study for 85 years now that has shown the same group of men, mostly men, some women. Most of them have passed away, but what they've seen is that the people who are most common variable for people in their 80s and 90s, who were living longer, healthier, happier lives, was how invested were they in their social relationships in their 50s and in midlife. And so one of the things that we start to
This is
realize,
so Chip, how do you define social? This is physical, social.
social,
This is what's the social media? How would you?
no. This is how often do I spend time and how close do I feel with the people in my life?
Okay,
So in
physical
midlife,
in person
yes, in
relation.
person.
Okay,
This is not about social media.
yeah.
This is about how quantity and quality do I have, but quality is even more important than quantity. Do I feel like I have people in my life that I care about, and do I invest in those relationships? Now, let's be clear, we have a loneliness epidemic, and that is across all age ranges. But it is in midlife that we start to realize how important relationships are to us. And therefore, we start to spend more time investing in them. And so often when we think of wellness, we think of personal wellness, my sleep, my diet, my exercise. Those are important. But what's even more important is how do I make time for friendships? Friendships are a practice. If you think of friendships as a practice, you're going to spend time on them. If you think of them as just like, oh, okay, I like my friendships, but they're just there, like the furniture in a room. And then over time that furniture is going to feel deteriorated and not well cared for. This is particularly true for men. Men are not as good as women about keeping their social relationships. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, excuse the language here. I have no more fucks left to give. Well, let me explain that. And Mark Madsen's book about with that word, the F word in it, has sold 16 million copies. Um, I think one of the things I've heard more than anything, we've had 5,000 people come to MEA, is I've heard people say this more than anything other sentence. And what they mean by this is not that they don't care about life anymore. It just is more like, I know what I do care about. And I focus on what I do care about. I don't care as much what other people think about me. I don't care as much what people expect of me. I care about the things I really care about. And therefore, I don't give an F about a bunch of other things. And it's a relief. It's a liberation for people. And they feel a bit like, wow, I am a child again because I'm not being obligated to do the things I don't really want to do. And so, excuse the language. This is my mom's favorite.
Don't you think a generation behind us has this even more in spades?
Yes.
I mean, they're more
Yeah.
nomadic in their travel. They seem to
Yeah.
jobs a lot more uh, fluently than our generation did, and so on.
Yeah, our generation, I'm a boomer, I'm 63, and I grew up with this board game called the Game of Life, and the Game of Life had one path for success in life. And for a lot of us, we sort of had a pathway in life that we thought we were supposed to live up to. The younger people feel less of that. They do not feel as obligated to some conventional path of success. And therefore, while young people are struggling right now in many ways, it's possible that when they get hit 45 or 50, which is usually the low point of the U curve of happiness, they won't feel so negative because they didn't pursue a definition of success that was defined by their parents. They're actually a little bit more independent than that. All right, let's go to the next slide. I'm marveling at my wisdom. So let's be clear. Wisdom is,
Pretty modest.
yeah, this is not a modest statement. So generally, someone who's wise is humble. So this is sort of a weird statement. But wisdom is correlated with age in some ways and not in others. So our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom. Let me say that again. Our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom. So the more life experience you have, the more lessons you've had, the more raw material you have to have wisdom. But if you don't metabolize those experiences in a way where you learn from them, then guess what? That those experiences are not, being cultivated and harvested into wisdom. So the truth is that for a lot of people I know coming to MEA, which is the world's first midlife wisdom school, they really want to learn how do they accelerate their wisdom. And we had the book. For those of you who buy the book, goes into some detail about how do you do that. But let me just say that the beautiful thing about wisdom is it is a social good. It's not just for you. If you're smart or you're savvy, it's just for you. But if you have wisdom, it's meant to be shared with others. And that's a beautiful bridge to the second half of the 12 reasons why, which let's go to the next slide. So this is number 7. I understand how my story serves me. When you are a quarter of the way through reading a novel, you sort of are introduced to the characters and the plot lines and the themes, but you don't necessarily know where it's going. But halfway through a novel, you know where it's going. And halfway through your life, you know yourself a lot better than you did when you were age 20 or 25. And so being able to see your patterns, your pattern recognition, understanding your shadow side, the parts of you that come out occasionally that you're not proud of, and then being able to see those and understand how do you make those into something positive as opposed to negative. That's what this reason's all about. The the people I really admire and appreciate are those who are self-reflective and self-aware enough to know both their upside and their downside of how they show up in the world. And as we get older, we are better at this.
What do you find? I mean, this doesn't seem like an intuitive thing for most people. I don't think most people seem to know. If they were, they would be much calmer in life, don't you think?
Yes, I think I would agree with you that most people, this of all of the 12 that I'm going to present, this is, I think, the most complex one. Um, but I actually think even though a lot of people are not very good at this, they're better at it often in midlife than they were 20 years earlier.
Sure, sure.
So, and that's partly because of the wisdom they've learned along the way.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide. I've learned how to edit my life. The first half of our life is about accumulating, and the second half of life is about editing. And so the fact is, by the time you get to 50-ish, you have a lot of obligations. You have a lot of stuff in your home. You have a lot of, friends. You have a lot of responsibilities at work. And it's almost like you have burdened yourself with so much that the second half of life is about editing and discerning what's important to you. And so I've learned how to edit my life. We do something at MEA called the Great Midlife Edit. We actually did it last night with this week's workshop cohort. And it's a beautiful exercise of like saying in a collective ritual, what are you ready to let go of? What are the things that no longer serve you? And once you've
Is
actually,
it talking about the physical aspects of garage sales and stuff like that, or
it's no,
emotional?
it could be physical things, but it also could be responsibilities. It could be mental ways of thinking, mindsets. You could have a mindset that served you well at 25, but does not serve you well at 55. So it could be anything. Like someone yesterday said, I'm letting go of my mindset that I always have to be the hero because I'm worn out. And so being the hero may have helped that person in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, but in their mid 50s, they're like, I want someone else to be the hero occasionally. I don't have to be the person who's always the hero or the caregiver. So so some of it's archetypes and mindsets as well. It's not just physical things.
Okay.
Next slide, please. This is where we start getting into the professional side of things. I'm joyously stepping off the treadmill. What does this mean? Well, if you midlife, you've gotten to a place where you say, yeah, you know what? I'm living someone else's life. I'm living my parents' idea my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And I'm realizing I like it, but I'm now 55 and I don't want to retire anytime soon, but I actually want to try something new. Maybe it's time for me to stop and get off the treadmill of what I've been doing to give myself some space to imagine something new. And so for many people, there's a litigation attorney who came to MEA last year, and she did not like being a litigation attorney because she was always arguing and negotiating. And by the end of the week, she realized that she had a childhood dream of being a baker when she grew up. And so she went to pastry chef school, and then realized she loves that. And now she's creating a bakery in her neighborhood. And so she got off the treadmill, and that gave her space to try something new.
Chip, I deal with a lot of corporations, especially HR executives. This scares the heck out of them. They're not prepared for people retiring
Yeah.
earlier than they expect them to, right? And yet they don't treat them well. As they age, they don't get treated well, but
Right.
they get shocked when somebody comes and says, "I'm hanging it up," right? So I think
Yeah.
this is from a corporate perspective, you really need to recognize this.
Well, this particularly, Vinny, in the situation we were in right now, we have a growing number of older people, and we have not a growing number of new births, and
Yeah.
so we have an aging population that wants to work longer, but they may say like to heck with this. I don't like working here. I'm gonna go do my own thing, and so yeah, with the unemployment rate as low as it is, this is something we have to be very careful about. All right, next one. I'm starting to experience time affluence. What is time affluence? When we think of affluence, we think of
I
money.
love your words, added life, time affluence.
Yes, thank you. So time affluence means that we think of affluence not just from a money perspective, but from a time perspective. And why is that important? Well, as we're getting older, what's most valuable in our life may be not money, but time. And so if we get off the treadmill, we give ourselves some space and time to enjoy that. And whether that's enjoying that with our kids or grandkids, or being involved in a political campaign, or finding a hobby that we love, all of those are great. But the thing that we need to ask ourselves here is, how can we become a beginner again? What's something that we want to become a beginner again at? Because the problem with a lot of people in midlife is that their life gets smaller and smaller. And really, if we're getting it right, starting in our 50s and beyond, it's meant to enlarge, because if we actually edit things, we get off the treadmill, we create some space to try new things. And when you start trying new things, your life not only feels more energized and interesting, but it actually, you feel like life isn't speeding up, but it's slowing down in a way that feels good. Let's go to the next slide, please. I've discovered my soul. So there's a guy named Richard Rohr, famous Christian mystic and Catholic priest, and he says that the primary operating system for the first half of our life is our ego, and it serves us well until we overuse it. And then in the second half of our life, a new operating system is emerging, which is the soul. And yet, no one gave us any operating instructions or any notice that, in fact, the soul was taking prominence. And so the bottom line here is, when you start to discover you've got a soul, wow, it's a whole new way of looking at your life. And you feel less focused on your own egocentric needs and a little bit more on something bigger than yourself. And so for a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, they get reacquainted with religion or spirituality. For others, it's just being in nature. It's something that actually, or just anything that gives them a sense of awe, AWE. And so, what a beautiful opportunity to feel liberated from your ego and more acquainted with your soul.
I like
And
that.
finally, the 12th of these is, I feel like I'm growing whole. So yes, we're growing old, but we're also growing whole. What does that mean, to be growing whole? When you're younger, you compartmentalize. You have your friends at work, you have your friends from college, you have your family, And often people feel a little bit like, well, to one group of people, I'm this way, to another group of people, I'm that way. Um, and so as we get older, we learn how to integrate integrity. We find integrity in who we are. And it's less about compartmentalizing ourselves. It's more about the alchemist learning to take these various parts of ourselves and fuse them into something that is a beautiful combination. So curiosity and wisdom, gravitas and levity, yin and yang, masculine, feminine, extrovert, introvert. As we get older, we actually learn how to alchemize the different polarities of ourselves. And when you meet someone who's 75 years old, 85 years old, and they feel very wise and very much whole, what you notice is their presence. And the presence is just the fact that they are fully integrated in who they are. And so that is really the 12th and maybe the most important
That's
of
why
the
I love the term elder, right? Because those are the in previous societies, the elders were respected and they did represent what you're talking about.
yeah. So if you go to the next slide, for those who are interested, there's the URL for the Modern Elder Academy, MEA Wisdom, my personal URL. And then the third one is like my daily blog. If this is interesting to you, my daily blog, I obviously write it daily. So I love writing in it because it gives me the opportunity to explore topics like the ones we've talked about today. And then I've even given you my email address. If somebody wants to email me with any questions, you're welcome to email me.
Chip, this is thank you for doing this. I'm gonna that was excellent.
Thank you.
You've talked about your some of the MEA Academy workshop, some of the folks who come there. Talk a little bit about random people who read your book and say, I've sent you emails or sent you feedback, either positive or negative.
Actually, no, I don't get much negative, actually, interestingly. I occasionally meet someone and say, like, oh, 35 to 75, that's not midlife. That's
Right.
too long. I mean, but generally people have been very positive. When it comes to MEA, the workshops and our programming, we also have online programs, and we have 26 regional chapters around the world too. Um, People, the things that they say is like, I feel a new sense of hope and optimism. I didn't realize I have so much life still ahead of me. I feel more curious and more open to trying something new. I feel more connected, and I feel less like I'm alone. Like my problems that I'm going through, no one else is going through, because guess what? We're all going through them. So it's really it's been beautiful. It's like a movement. It's we are a school, and it feels like we're sort of on the pioneering tip of a movement of people in midlife and beyond
Have you
who
heard
are,
from have you heard from folks that go, I don't watch political TV anymore, or that is such a distraction. You've given me so many more things to think about, much more positive. Have you had some
yeah.
of that feedback?
Oh yes, we've had people who've turned around their lives who realized that the normal political television that they were watching was sort of making them depressed,
Yeah.
and that they really instead wanted to feel a deep sense that they were connected to something bigger than themselves. So yeah, I mean there's a book by Dacher Keltner, who's one of our faculty members. He's a UC Berkeley professor. It's called awe, AWE. And the two most common ways people feel awe in life are not nature. They're moral beauty, when you're surrounded by people who have compassion and resilience and curiosity, and you appreciate their human qualities. And it's collective effervescence, when you feel a sense of your own ego separation dissolves and your sense of communal joy arises. And we hear that all the time.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the two bookend cohorts, right? I'm a baby boomer like you, but we've had a number of people who are still alive. Like, the working age doesn't end at 65.
Mhm.
And then we've got a cohort behind us, right? Let's talk about the aging cohort first. I get the sense we've kind of accepted that 65 Social Security is the end point, and so long as they collect that, we don't really focus much on them. But they're a vibrant community. Many of them want to work, and HR people, I mean, we talk about diversity and inclusion and so on, but that's just race and gender based. Age doesn't seem to factor in any DEI, right? So
Yeah,
tell me what you're seeing about that generation, because I'm a little worried that we've kind of neglected them and
yeah.
they're not doing as well as they really should be.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Wisdom at Work: The Making of a Modern Elder, and I wrote about this. And um I think what we really have to realize is that we are moving out of the knowledge economy into the wisdom economy. And the knowledge economy, served us well. Peter Drucker, coined the term knowledge worker in 1959. And yet all of the world's knowledge is on this little device in my pocket. And ChatGPT has just commoditized knowledge. And so if knowledge is everywhere and everybody has it, then what's the differentiator? The differentiator is wisdom. And so therefore, I do think we're going to see more people staying in the workplace longer by choice or necessity, and hopefully more organizations and companies seeing the value of their older workers, because there's something that these older workers can offer, some institutionalized wisdom.
Well, and financially, we need to take better care of them, right? I mean, Social
Yep.
Security is broken. You talked about the pyramid, right? I think 20 years ago, or a while ago, 20 people were contributing into Social Security. Now only three are contributing, for everyone that's taking out. So we can't rely on that. And when
Right.
you look at the private 401ks and so on, quite often they weren't designed for people living another
That-
20 years, 25 years.
That's right.
And frankly, Wall Street takes a big bite out of a lot of that in many different hidden fees and God knows what else, right? So I
Yeah.
think I think we need to, as a society, face up to the fact that that generation still has a lot of value, and we need to
Mhm.
compensate them and take care of them much better than we're doing right now.
Agreed. Agreed. So let's talk about the other side.
The other side I think is very misunderstood. Now I have two kids who are in their late 20s, early 30s, right? And I sometimes don't understand them. I think our generation treats them as in one or two ways. From a corporate perspective, I think we've used them as an excuse to justify, oh yeah, we're going to invest more in sustainability because that's the future of the planet and the young consumer wants it, or the young consumer wants more mobility, more social media, whatever, right? We've used that as a justification for a lot of stuff. On the other hand, if you talk to a lot of HR people, they'll say, my God, that generation is so entitled, right? They don't want to work for anything, they're not loyal, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a very misunderstood generation, but some of it
Yeah.
is justified, I guess. What do you think?
Well, let's say, my experience at Airbnb was, I'm a boomer predominantly surrounded by millennials. And I learned as much from them as they did from me. So let's start by saying, I think we have a lot to learn from each other. We have 5 generations in the workplace for the first time. The US Department of Labor says that in 2025, the majority of Americans will have a younger boss. Imagine that. I mean, if somebody said to you, Vinny, 25 years ago, that the majority of Americans will have a younger boss, like, oh no, that doesn't work. Like your org chart is older people at the top and younger people at the bottom. But that's changing. And it's changing partly because of our reliance on digital intelligence and technology. And the fact that digital natives, who are younger people, have more, again, these are generalizations, but they have more facility and skill set around digital intelligence. So, yes, is there sometimes an entitlement? Yes. Is there a lack of loyalty in staying longer in work? That's been true for many generations. So I think as we get older, we maybe get more loyal. And yet when we're young, we want to try different things. And But I think the entitlement is more specific to this generation, partly because when you see, Zuckerberg and Brian Chesky at Airbnb and all these people becoming billionaires in their 20s or 30s, we didn't see that in the past. If you became a billionaire in your 20s or 30s, it's because you inherited family wealth. Today, it's because you started a tech company. And therefore, the comparison somebody makes, and also in social media, such that, oh, I feel like I'm not very good at this. I'm 30 years old and I'm not a billionaire yet. Well, then you're going to get entitled because you feel like, okay, where's my billion? And that's not something we had in the past. So the expectations are high.
You know, interestingly, I was in Sausalito last week, and I was talking to somebody who was at the workshop we were at, and I said, your generation, my generation, you were a bit different. You've done a lot more interesting things. We were geeks. We put our heads down. We listened to our parents and said, "This is the career path you'll follow," and so on. And we were talking about the flower children of the late '60s, and now the protests that we're seeing in this generation. And it's like I feel like we had a boring life compared to both of those both of
Yes.
those bookends.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I like to look at is when I'm looking at a younger generation is what's different than us at that age. I mean, the me generation is Tom Wolfe defined baby boomers as the me generation in the 1970s, and cultural narcissism. And so I want to be clear that I think some of what goes on for people in their 20s and 30s is normal. It's the life stage stuff. It's not about their generation. And then there's some things like the entitlement, like that sense of like, and maybe even a little bit more the sense of doom. There's a little bit of more of a sense of doom around these global kinds of things. We did have, but like when I was growing up and you were growing up, we had the Russians versus the Americans. Like, who's going to bomb who? So we've had these before. So, but yeah, I also have a lot of confidence having worked with a lot of younger people. I have a lot of hope.
Well, you're an optimist. I mean, my God, anyone who can present midlife the way you do has to be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chip. This has been wonderful. Thank you for
Yeah.
taking the time and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinny. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.